Okay, the SASSA Board of Directors meeting for March 19th is called to order at 2:01. We have roll call.
Sure. School District 20,
Here.
District 25,
Here.
District 33,
Here.
District 34,
Here.
District 45,
Here.
District 48,
Here.
District 58,
Here.
District 60, District 63,
Here.
District 66, District 68,
Here.
District 88, District 94,
Here.
District 99, District 180, District 201, District 202,
Here.
District 205. We have a quorum.
And District 66 and District 201. Andrew and Jack will be walking in a second. Cinda.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, would everyone please rise for the pledge? Matt, do we have a third flag? No. Everyone should have
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to public comment. Is there any members of the public who wish to speak today? Good. And anything submitted in writing? Singer or Kim?
No.
Nothing? Okay, we'll move on from public comment then and go to the consent agenda.
Right, the consent agenda is pretty straightforward, nothing of exception to note.
Nothing of exception to note this time? Okay. And if there's no questions otherwise, we'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda. Report, is there a second? Second. Second, Omar. Any questions or discussion? If not, roll call, please.
District 25,
Yes.
District 33, District 33, District 34,
Yes.
District 45,
Yes.
District 48,
Yes.
District 58,
Yes.
District 63,
Yes.
District 68,
Yes.
District 94,
Yes.
District 202,
Yes.
and District 20.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, very good. We're moving on to action items, which is 5 in the agenda. Kim, we got a resolution regarding non-renewal of honorable dismissal of support staff.
I do, so many of you may recall, Jim and Jimmy started this process a couple of years ago last year. We were hosting the grant for Project Choices. Project Choices actually consisted more than we currently have. We have 5 IMRR staff. Interestingly, they don't work in any programs at SASSA. We're hosting the grant. So Jim and Jimmy started the process to stop having SASSA be the agent of the grant. They're working with, I believe, West 40 for next year. So this is really kind of that last step in the process of kind of ending our long-term relationship with them, and they can move forward and work with a new governing agent. So motion that we're hoping that the board adopts the resolution regarding non-renewal and honorable dismissal of support staff.
All right, Kim, thank you for explaining. Are there any questions for Kim before we move on to a entertaining motion? Jack, Andrew, Sean, welcome. Andrew, thoughts? Any questions for Kim? If not, we'll take a motion to approve the resolution. Presented. Yeah, is there a second?
Second, 68.
We will need a roll call. Welcome to the 3 of you who just came in. You're on for a motion here. All right, roll call, please.
District 94,
Yes.
District 201,
Yes.
District 202,
Yes.
District 20,
Yes.
District 25,
Yes.
District 33,
Yeah.
District 34,
Yes.
District 45,
Yeah.
District 48,
Yeah.
District 58,
Yes.
District 60,
Yes.
District 63. 63?
Yes. Yes.
District 66,
Yes.
District 68.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the resolution for appointment of IMRF authorized agent. Kim?
Sure. As you know, the IMRF needs us to have an appointed authorized agent. Currently, it's Julie. We are making measures to move that over to Rachel for beginning next year, but we wanted to get that done now, so we didn't lose track of it. So really, it's just transferring the authorized agent from Julie to Rachel.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we're all trying to get connected here. All right, any questions on the IMRF authorized agent resolution? If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
So moved, Winfield 34.
Is there a second? All right, Amy? And roll call, any questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
District 58,
Yes.
District 60,
Yes.
District 63,
Yes.
District 66,
Yes.
District 68,
Yes.
District 94,
Yes.
District 201,
Yes.
District 202,
Yes.
District 20,
Yes.
District 25,
Yes.
District 33, District 34,
Yes.
District 45,
Yes.
District 48.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. We're gonna move on to discussion information items. SAFSA 24-25 enrollment, Kim.
Here you have your enrollment in front of you. As always, we've broken it out by district. Our enrollment for our students in our current FAFSA program remains pretty steady. I think we're up by 1 this month. But we've always held pretty strong. We see the 380 and the 390. So we're glad to see that, right? As kids move out, other kids move in. So that seems to be how we go. And then we also broke it out by district and anyone have any questions, I'm glad to address them. Otherwise, it's just informational.
Any questions on the enrollment report? And we kind of overlaid that with human resources staffing update, Kim.
Yeah, similarly, we are down 16 staff, which is down a half a staff member from last month. As you know, most of these positions are aides, are assistants. A couple of last minute things with certified staff, social version, what kind of we're really trying to make do without having to contract anybody for the next few weeks of school. So we're still at about 16 positions.
So you expect this to be pretty stable at the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Committee reports.
So we've had a really busy, really packed couple of committee meetings that I want to spend a little bit more time on. In regard to our finance committee, we met back in the beginning of this month. Tammy was there. She gave a wonderful presentation. It was so good. The finance committee asked her to come back and meet with this group. So I'm not going to spend time going through that. I'm going to let Tammy do that in just a few minutes. Also presented at that meeting, Tara Corral, one of our great program administrators. Through her work here, she has found our audiological billing, there's a better way for us to be billing. So she came to Rachel and I with a proposal. We believe it is solid, it's more equitable than what we're currently doing. The finance committee asked that we take that to the directors meeting on Friday, which we're doing. They probably are a little bit more closer to what it is we're actually talking about in that. So we're going to bring it to them Friday, bring it back to the finance committee next month. But it's not, our audiological department is talking minimum staff, but it's not equitable the way it's currently being built. So we are just looking to fixing that. It's hopefully a little change, and I'll provide more information at our next board meeting. The directors. And then also, one of our tasks was to look at our cost for ES5. We talked about it here last month, and we followed up with it. Finance committee asked Rachel and I to do some reach out to the superintendents that are involved in this, Andrew, Brian, and Keith. We did, and we have a recommendation moving forward. It's actually my executive director's report, but I'll share that now. We were expecting to pay about $54,000 over the summer in rent. We currently did $17,000 per site. What we did then is said, listen, let's take a look at the classrooms we have. We have 36 classrooms. Let's divide that into the 54,000 that was originally budgeted. That came out to about 1,600 something per classroom, but then we have little nooks and crannies everywhere, little workspaces. So if we do the leases at $1,500 per room and $750 per workspace, that is more equitable based on, Andrew's hosting 18 classrooms, Brian's hosting 10, and Keith is hosting 4. So I think that is more manageable. And when we look at all that, it comes to $53,250, so it's right on budget. I talked with Brian, Andrew, and Keith. We think that this is an equitable way to move forward, so this is really how I'm recommending we move forward, and we'll put that in our leases when we send those out, unless there's conversation or thoughts about that.
So no approval needed from our boards,
Right.
between the district and us, and everybody, the district, those superintendents are good. That's awesome.
Thank you to all involved.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
I do want to talk about facilities. VP is not here today. That was, we asked him not to be here, and we decided that I would present a little bit, about what we talked about. So, we had focus groups going on, and we have the data from our focus groups, and VP came in with 8 strategies that supported the focus groups. So the bottom line from the focus groups, right, our existing spaces are not meeting the unique needs of our students. They're good spaces, they're nice sizes, but there's not the unique needs that are in all of the classrooms, right? The accommodative furniture, Hoyer lifts, the adequate spaces for sensory spaces. We don't have hot water in all of our buildings. Our playgrounds are not accessible. So this is a whole list of things that came up. And again, right, the focus groups were, they love our spaces, they love working within our buildings. They're not meeting the needs of our students based on their exceptionalities. As such, VP put together 8 strategies. Our facility committee is recommending 3 strategies for us to move forward with. These are the 5 they're not recommending, and I'll go through a checklist that we used. But these basically have no opportunity for any type of satellite classrooms anymore. And one of the things that was very relevant with all the focus groups is that we need some satellite classes, albeit not as many as we currently have. The solutions that the facility committee is recommending that we further pursue all have the highlighted in there, the lighter red are the same, and it talks about satellite programs. We know that we have students in our satellite programs that absolutely have authentic inclusionary experiences, and we want to maintain that, specifically with some of our DHH students, some of our vision students, and some of our SLE students. So we would anticipate 9 to 12 classrooms that would take us from EC all the way up to high school for students that need to be authentically included. The next piece to this is where we run into some variability. So the first piece, option 3, is to take a look at Southeast and just build everything at Southeast. VP and I and Rachel had a conversation afterward. We don't know how viable that is, so East Community is looking a little bit more into that. Parking is a huge issue, right? We have about 400 staff members. Currently, we don't have that capacity at Southeast, but that is one option, just to eliminate the transition, the administrative center, and just build everything at Southeast with those 9 to 12 satellite classes. The other one is to purchase property, right? So that could be purchasing property in our area or within our boundaries, where we could build one large centralized location. Or the third option was to build out Southeast and then to look for a more location for our more northern districts and have another location up there if Southeast couldn't accommodate everything. So this was the sheet, the checklist that VP put together, where we looked at all of the strategies that we had come up with, and then he did a kind of a closer analysis of what strategies fit the comment focus things the best. And again, those were strategies 3, 4, and 8. So keep some classrooms, satellite, look at expanding Southeast, more centralized location, or a larger centralized location, or 2 mid-centralized locations. So just want to revisit the why again. Having a more centralized location will allow us to provide more robust instruction to our students. We talked about that touring, right? We need to have, our staff need to be able to have collaboration time. We need to be able to professionally develop our staff. As our students continue to come to us with more exceptional needs, we need to be able to meet their needs. We also believe that there will be incredible program and resource efficiency, long-term savings, sophisticated innovation that really speaks to the needs of our students. When we look at assistive tech, it looks very different for a lot of our SACID students, really trying to be as innovative as possible. Professional development opportunities are probably the 2 most important pieces here is family connections. When Lizzie and I met with our families, they are craving for connection with other families with students like theirs. And in a SACID community, with our districts being so spread, it's hard for them to have that connection. They have connections now with some of the kids and families in their neighborhood, but the desire was, man, it would be great if I could go to, an activity and not worry about whether or not my kid is going to be quiet and have other parents understand this and not judge me. So they're looking for that. And I think, and I know I said this last month, but our site at Lyle has done a tremendous job of really building that community. And then ideally, right, really what this is all about is improved outcomes for our students. So, I'm not presenting that because I have my next slide is going to come a little bit slower. Maybe I won't do that. So I asked VP, the facility committee wanted to know a ballpark, right? Like, because today I'm going to ask you, are we okay moving forward with this, the recommendations of the facility committee? And I want you to know what this is going to potentially cost. After this, Tammy is going to present on some funding options. But in working with VP, he put together some ballpark estimates for 3 options, and we're looking currently between $80 and $112 million. So I want to get this out in front of everybody before we go down a road that we may not be able to fully go down. So VP is planning on coming to the next facility meeting. He'll have more data, what compromises these numbers, ideas, and so forth. But again, I just wanted to get that out there for this group. And again, so what we'll need is, the facility committee will need is direction to pursue the 3 options as recommended, hybrid options, other options that we haven't talked about, but continue to work with VP on really kind of costing out and exploring these options a little bit more in detail. Tammy's up next to go through funding, but before we do that, are there any questions, thoughts that you have right now based on the facility committee recommendation? And I also want to write Jean, Sean, Brian, Mark, I know I'm missing Hank,
Sean,
anything you want to add, please do so.
Real quick, so I'm looking at the, original presentation, and there's a strategy 8A and 8B. One, it looks like it's an addition, one looks like replacement. When we take a look at strategy 8, are they both the similar cost? Is that why they're 8A or 8B? Or are you going to
Yeah.
recommend the 8A or 8B? I'm just trying to, a little clarification.
I'm trying to remember what 8A and 8B were.
Well, 8A looks like it's a two-story addition, about 82,000 square feet. And
Okay.
8B looks like it's a new one-story building with about 57,000 square feet. But they were an alternative, so when you say 8, I'm just
Yeah,
wasn't sure.
so BP put other locations onto that southeast, land. So those would be, one would be, 120 square foot different building, and then the other one would be a 57 square foot building in addition to southeast. I think that's how I remember it. So I think that as we pursue this, once we have a better idea of what Southeast might be able to offer in regard to space, then 8A or B, one would be more necessary than the other, depending on how much space we could host at Southeast.
Okay. And are they about the similar cost?
He didn't break those two out,
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Somebody else on the facilities can, now I will be honest, I'm kind of forgetting that too, the A and the B.
Mhm.
I didn't really know why we did an A and a B versus an 8 or a 9. Kim, could you go up 3 slides to the spreadsheet that has all the strategies and options listed out? Now, up the VP's sheet with the red, yellow, and green. It's one, yeah, there you go. So that one, when you look in yours, that one, this is the one the facilities committee spent a lot of time with. And that does map all that out, so you can see, we gave that a lot of thought, and that's where we had the consensus of the, I forget, 3, 4, and 8. But that one doesn't show the 8A and the 8B. So maybe, Kim, I don't know if that can be reshared so people can see the difference. Maybe that's.
And it was something about it that
Remember, Brian?
both answers were the same, right? It was a slight difference, but philosophically it was the same overall recommendation. It was just like, instead of putting it over here, instead of like a 2-story addition to Southeast, it was a 1-story flat addition or something like that, wasn't it?
I think so. I think the reds and the yellow, or the reds, yellows, and greens were the same.
Same for both.
So
options, for
that
both,
was the
right.
A and the B, even though, to Pat's point, though, they sound like two different things. Like I said, to me at the time, I remember thinking, let's just have, we have 8 options, let's just have 9. I think that caused a little bit of confusion. But, whatever we focused on is where Kim and them took off. Go ahead, sir.
You
I
have
think,
Oh, okay.
Rachel and I, if our memories are correct, believe that 8A and B is just one strategy because it is an addition at Southeast and another location. So you would have both because,
So same solution like Brian said, but
Yes.
different. Okay.
so you would have, we would add on to Southeast in addition to also having a new building, which is why it's broken out like A and B.
But a different type of addition. One was like a 2-story and one was a 1-story or
Yes.
something like
Yes.
that. But all the dots were the same colors
Yes, exactly right.
for both.
The other thing I just wanted to clarify, and Kim, I know what you meant. Well, I think I just want to clarify. So you made a reference to, if anybody caught it, about the separate building in SASA's boundaries. Just to clarify, we don't literally mean necessarily in one of our school district boundaries. We meant it in the general. If we had our big fancy map on the wall where we're 3 kind of islands with this massive space in between, it might be in that massive space in between. So in other words, there's no bias towards being in or out of a district. It's more the general location to accommodate the far reaches of our district from the north to the south in particular. Right? I just want to clarify.
Yes.
We didn't mean inside district.
Correct.
We really have kind of 3 boundaries.
The other thing that's out there, I was asked, we have a subcommittee, we talked about looking at potentially expanding our options. So we started that work last week. We have about 200 students placed out for students with emotional disabilities and or students with autism. So right now, the special ed directors are working with Lizzie on identifying what are the characteristics of strong programming, what does it look like, what changes would we need to make to be more ready to accept more students. The finance guys, as you can imagine, want to know how we're paying for this in general, but we try to explain, listen, we're moving through a process. But there was, I do want to share, there was a resonating thought from the special ed directors, at least on this committee, was, listen, just because we have students placed at other programs doesn't mean that they are the quality that we would like. And we would really caution us to get stuck on like where all of our kids are, but rather look at what are the quality programs and what can we do to replicate that quality or even make it better here. So there was a sense of recognizing, again, we have some great partners in our private places, and there are some that folks are like, we have to send students there because we don't have any other options. So really kind of looking at, what do we need to do to build more options to keep more students within our SASB program and offering a fantastic program for more students.
Did the committee look at all the existing school districts located in, not necessarily our cooperative, but in DuPage County, the central area, and look at other options like purchasing an empty school and rehabbing it? I don't want to burst the balloon. I know we're in the visioning session, but looking at $80 to $110 million and the impact that that's going to have, that's going to be a huge element that we have to discuss, given the financial status of probably all of our school districts and the tax burden that could leave us with.
Absolutely.
That's concerning. Again, I know we're very early in the process, and I don't want to shortchange any of the visioning, but I'm just looking at that number and kind of scaring me a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the full committee. We did not go that far into discussion yet. In talking with VP, we did talk about, listen, as we move forward, it would be cheaper or better to look for spaces that already have pre-existing walls and foundations, so we don't need to build, but we have not priced that out yet. But I don't think anyone has a problem looking at that.
Okay, committee members, just speak up. I agree. I think Kevin asked a great question that we're probably all kind of thinking. I don't think we got that far yet. I think it was more the option, but if that exists in one of our districts, like you said, or another district in our area that's not a SASB member, and I would say, I think we also mentioned the possibility of other property that may not necessarily be a current public school building, but would be viable to be converted.
Right, I'm thinking.
I think that's everything on the table. Everything on the table.
And I don't know,
Yep.
but there's a lot of for-profit colleges that have gone under,
That's right.
that have facilities that are all ADA compliant,
Yep.
Again, I completely echo what our special education director said, and the current state, we wanting the highest quality for our kids, especially those with the most significant needs. And again, I don't want to burst the balloon here, but I'm sure all of us are thinking this, and I know that would be a very hard pill to swallow, just the amount that we're looking at.
When we get there, that'll be good. So with these numbers that we have, whatever you divide, that's where Tammy, I think, will be a key player for sure. But yeah, I mean, committee members still have the wrong. Like I said, I think we haven't not eliminated anything. The goal isn't some shiny new thing, but yeah, visioning for sure. But it could come from anywhere, and obviously anything that would drive that cost down and still meet all the goals here would be huge. Committee members, anything? we're
I
missing?
think we also need to compare it not to zero, because I think you have an annual cost right now of leasing the building
Right.
on
We
Ogden,
talked
all the
about that,
buildings
100%.
that you have in individual schools. And
Right.
so it would probably be worthwhile to compare the differential between whatever we're talking about here.
Right.
And even if we make no decision and continue the world in which we live, that still has a number, and then figure out what that difference is to the.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We did, I think it was finance, we maybe touched on that, maybe Tim would get that a little bit, but it's a difference, not from zero to your point, it's a difference from what we're paying and spending now. Indeed.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd like to add is we should probably also look to see if anyone in the district and our districts are building. Somebody's putting classroom addition on, might be some cost sharing possibilities of the space available. Double the size of the existing addition.
Great point, great point.
I think that this, at this phase, it's really just about looking at long-term, what is going to be the most efficient way, to deliver the highest quality programming. And I think that I was going to ask the same question about those numbers are not the net, right? This is not like, without subtracting the costs that were already, that might go away potentially, right? Both in terms of the one-time facility piece, but also long-term in terms of savings of consolidated programs more efficiently, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I just think we're really early in this, and I think confidence that we'll be able to problem solve through, some of the challenges that could be ahead, but I appreciate the work that went in to this, and I know that it was really funny because as we looked at the map, right, so like we look more centrally, everything central is not in the co-op, right? So it's like they're right in the middle of Case, right, I think, right in the co-op. So, but it doesn't, so what? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be, as long as it's got, the location is conducive to what we need, what does it matter, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
BP's prices were based on new construction. And we also talked about, he's like, Kim, you would need to start looking at the broker, to start looking for other properties as well. So that is not off, at least that wasn't off of my table. The finance committee just didn't talk about that in that specific.
Is there anything in our articles of agreement that handles some guidance on how to acquire any acquisition, new property or anything like that?
Don't know that offhand, but I will look.
Or distribution costs.
Well, we're going to get to that with Tammy too, to give us options to determine, do we have something in place or would we need to modify what we have if we agree to something else? I think just to reset us just a tiny bit, this is an awesome discussion and perfect and in line with where the facilities committee was. We still go back to whether it's a existing building that we could acquire or lease or whatever, or Andrew's option or solution, whatever it is, we just wanted to kind of focus though on the 3, 4, and 8 as presented, and then if you want to go back to your 3 bubble thing, right above this one, up one, yep. That one, and again, if you haven't looked in your board packet, it is in there. It's a little bit buried in here under under 6D, but you'll find it. But if you haven't, take a look at it, and then that's what outlines, that would still be what we're shooting for, but what buildings, physical facilities they are to get there to be determined, right? That's wide open, just to clarify.
I do think it's, with option 3, there's no property to be purchased, so there's really no potential savings in purchasing existing property with 3.
Because that's the southeast option,
Right,
right?
just building on. So really 4 and 8 might have those cost savings if you're purchasing property, whereas 3, that's not built in. And
3 is the one that Kim said.
Yeah, so VP and I talked about that. VP, he's like, I don't know if that's really viable. I'm like, well, VP, we're gonna need to talk about that. We talked about that in the facility committee. My recommendation is to see what we could actually do at Southeast, and really utilize and maximize that space. I don't think it's gonna be able to host everything, but I think it will be able to host a lot more than it currently does. And then we see what we need after that, and then look for something, right? It may not be that big, but that could be something that we look for in the northern area. And, we'll look at structuring our program so that we can kind of have 2 places. But I think maximizing Southeast makes a lot of sense to me. But again, right, like we might be working with somebody and they may come up with a piece of land that is going to be more ideal. And I think, right, I certainly don't have any problem looking into that either.
didn't we have an estimated annual cost savings associated with the
Yeah.
options?
It was about $5.7 million, right? That's with our leases, that's with, really taking a look at how we're structuring our staffing models and whatnot. So there'll be an annual cost that we would predict to be about $5.5 million.
And that's a big number we're talking about over a period of time, to factor in, and so that'll be good. Yeah. So I didn't want to say this, but I'm very skeptical based on our facilities committee meeting that we can drop everything on that property. But again, keeping it on the table just as an option, since we already have the property, right? It's just not very big. Very big space. We can talk about something that's to be determined. What else? That's a great discussion. Anything else? Okay. Because if not, we'll stay a little fluid here. We want to move to Kim. Is there anything else in committee reports? Would you? I don't want to.
But yeah,
Before we get to Tammy and finance.
oh yeah. It's in the board packet under committee updates, if you want more information on that. And then I just wanted to talk about working with the extender, so no, we're good. So the next piece is Tammy's going to walk us through some funding options and some of the things that the finance committee will be dealing, wrestling with. But she's really the best person to explain this. Alrighty.
Stand so you can see and hear me maybe a little bit better. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with everybody today. We're going to just dive right into ways that SASID can finance capital projects. So if we go to our topics for today, I'm going to start first with the financing mechanisms themselves. Some of them will seem somewhat familiar to you. Some of them are going to be brand new to you. And then I'm going to show you some very preliminary numbers, talk about allocation methods for a project that you may consider, and then sort of how does this all play out in terms of steps, because it's a multifaceted process. So these are the ways that SASID can finance capital projects, and we'll talk about each one of these individually, the first four. There are two that can be issued by SASID, and then there are a couple where a member district could actually issue financing on behalf of SASID. And I'll talk about why that might be applicable to a special education cooperative. And of course, in any project, member districts always have the option to pay their share of any project upfront, whether you make a fund balance contribution or you do your own financing to fund your share of the project. So that's something that's, I know, will be in the back of mind for everybody as we talk about the financing mechanisms today. So the first one we'll talk about are special education bonds issued by SASID. So this authority comes right out of the school code. Many of you have sold bonds. Those are considered general obligation bonds, which means you have the full faith and credit of your tax base as a school district behind you, which means you have the ability to extend property taxes to pay the debt back. SASID does not have the ability to do that. So you do not have the general obligation distinction in front of special education bonds. They are just called special education bonds, but they come right out of the school code. To be able to issue these, the governing board has to adopt a resolution to authorize the sale. There is no requirement for individual member districts boards to adopt resolutions to sell the bonds. Not to say you wouldn't have a lot of robust discussion about it at your individual board member tables, but they do not have voting authority for the issuance of special education bonds. It only rests with the governing board. So if you are a member district that decides to participate in the financing, and let's say that financing is executed sometime in 2026, and it's a 10-year financing, and in year 4, your member district decides to leave SASID, you still have an obligation to pay your share of the debt service over the life of the issue. That being said, there's also the concept of joint and several liability. So let's say you're a member district that does leave in year 4, in my example. For whatever reason, your district decided, we know that we have that irrevocable obligation to pay, but we're just not going to. Then all the remaining member districts of SASID are joint and several liable for that payment that that member district has not paid. So both of those are important components. When SASID issues special education bonds, if you are a member district that's part of the financing, your allocation does not count towards your individual member district's debt capacity. So you don't have to worry about your debt capacity formula. When special education bonds are sold, I would say in most cases, they're going to have a credit rating because most of them are likely going to have a maturity schedule longer than 5 or 10 years. They may be large enough, looking at least 5 to 10 million of a transaction, that in terms of getting it sold, it makes sense to sell it as a negotiated sale, for example. And that means you need a credit rating. In some instances, there may be a placement for those bonds, meaning you go to a local bank or there's another type of individual investor that might want them, and you wouldn't have to put a credit rating. But assuming that you would, the marketability would be very, very strong because you have strong credit ratings amongst all of you. And when special education bonds are sold, the credit rating, it's the strongest link test. So if there's 5 member districts that participate in the sale of special education bonds, whichever district of those 5 districts has the strongest credit rating, that's the credit rating that's assigned to SASID bonds. Okay. So, in the school code, what it says in terms of your share of the, not only the project cost specifically, but really getting more to the sale of the bonds themselves, what the school code says is it's based upon EAV, allocation of EAV in all of those participating member districts. And of course, if you're a unit district, then your EAV is doubled in both the numerator and the denominator, as you would expect. And then that third bullet point just talks about how the amount of your payments as a member district can't be above 0.15% of your EAV if you're K-8 or 912, or 0.3% if you're a unit district. That, I've never seen that be an issue for any of the financings we've done. Now, you well, I shouldn't say you, the governing board can adopt a side agreement or an amendment to the joint agreement to come up with a different allocation method. And I would say this is a pretty common practice because as I'm sure your wheels are turning and as you'll see some math later, basing it on EAV may not be the most equitable way to do that amongst, the perspectives that many of you have. So as long as there is a side agreement or an amendment to the joint agreement, you can come up with whatever allocation method you think makes the most sense for SACSED. However, if there was a default, if there was a dispute in court about the allocation method at some point down the road, the debt service payments would go back to, would default to EAV only. So I've never seen that happen. That's not been an issue in any of the transactions we've done. But just know that that's what the code says. It would default back to the EAV calculation if there was a dispute at some point down the road. Okay? All right. And I would say, by the way, we've been involved in many transactions for special ed cooperatives. The vast majority, they are special education bonds. Okay? And some of it has to do with just the structure, the legal structure of SACSED, like a lot of other special education cooperatives. But SACSED could also issue debt certificates, and we just closed on a transaction a couple weeks ago for Eisenhower Cooperative. They sold debt certificates. And again, you can issue these as a cooperative for capital projects, and they are payable from any and all lawful funds of SACSED. So what that really means is SACSED could, in theory, of course, with everybody's agreement to that, or majority agreement to, if there was a line item in the operating budget of SACSED where SACSED and you all agreed, oh, we've got this line item, $500,000 of debt service for 10 years for a project, we'll just allocate that toward payment of debt certificates, meaning you don't necessarily have to come up with a separate allocation method, a formula for paying the debt service back. You can simply put it in the operating budget, okay? But the amount of debt certificates that you issue can never be more than 2.875% of the EAV of all member districts. Again, I don't think that would ever be a problem because you all have very sizable EAV. But if you want to have a separate allocation method for debt service, meaning you want to have individual calculations, individual numbers for every member district, then you would have to come up with that, decide what that is, and amend the joint agreement to do that. There's question marks as to the irrevocable obligation to pay and joint and several liability, because that's not required under the law for debt certificates like it is for special education bonds. You can put it in there, and quite frankly, all the experience that we've had, the cooperatives have done that, mostly really because it makes them more marketable when they're sold. So, I mean, as investors, again, it's like when you sell bonds for your projects, the investors just want to know they're going to get their principal and interest back. No different when SACSED sells something. Putting it in there makes it a tighter transaction and gives investors more confidence they're going to get their principal and interest over the life of SACSED. Now, the interest rate on debt certificates is slightly higher than special education bonds, okay? Usually 0.15 to 0.2%. Not a whole lot, but they can be a little bit higher. You, again, may have a credit rating. In some cases, you may have to have a debt reserve fund, so you all don't have to really deal with that when you sell bonds on your own. But what that means is There could be an investor that says, I'll buy these debt certificates from SACID, but I feel more comfortable at closing on the transaction. When we give them their proceeds from the sale, they need to have a year's worth of debt service in a reserve fund somewhere, just to give us assurance they've got the money to pay it. I think it'd be highly unlikely in your case as a cooperative that you would need to have a debt service reserve fund. One major difference though on the credit rating piece is when there's a transaction, a debt certificate, and if it has a credit rating, which it very likely would, credit rating is based on all of the member districts within the cooperative, which again, there's very strong credit ratings for all of the districts represented in this room, but it's more complex. Even if there's only a handful of member districts that participate in the financing, the rating agencies are going to look at the rating of every single member district. At the end of the day, because it's payable from all funds, correct, yes, that's fine. Okay. All right, so a member district could issue special education bonds on its own or debt certificates on behalf of the cooperative. And these are very, very rare, and they happen in cases where there may be a cooperative where the credit strength of the individual member districts is not strong, except for maybe one or two outlying member districts. So you may have several that have a really lower credit ratings, but there's one or two that are very strong, and they say, we'll issue it on behalf of the cooperative so that we can, get the lowest possible interest rate. We'll just do this. We don't plan to sell any other debt. We don't have anything else complicating our situation. We'll do it on behalf of SACID. So I would say this is also very rare. From time to time, a situation like this might arise. And again, the governing board has the authority here. So they have to adopt a resolution to designate that particular member district is going to issue the bonds on the cooperative's behalf. And the Board of Education of that particular member district, the issuing district, has to adopt a resolution to sell the bonds. So that gets a little more complicated too, I'm sure, for those conversations with individual boards. And similar to what we talked about for special education bonds issued by SACID, every member district has to agree to be jointly and severally liable for the bond payments. That is really no different. And again, the debt service payments have to be made by the member districts. And there's also the irrevocable obligation to pay, like we talked about. So there are a lot of similarities. And even so far as they don't count against any individual member district's debt capacity. And that marketability is really going to depend on the credit rating of that individual district. So again, I don't know that this would necessarily be something that we would want to pursue. There really would be something we'll need to, but it is an option. And it's similar if we look at debt certificates on the next slide, very, very similar in concept to the debt certificates that would be issued by SACID. Still the same sort of question marks. If you wanted to consider joint and several liability and the irrevocable obligation to pay, then you might have to amend the joint agreement. But I would say one glaring difference here is that if a member district issues debt certificates, and some of you have issued your own debt certificates before, when you issue them on behalf of SACID, it is considered your debt for debt limit purposes. So that might be a reason why a member district, no one might step forward and say, we're willing to do that because we have our own financing plans or needs. And of course, the credit rating again is based on the member district that's issuing the debt certificates for SACID. This is a chart we put together just so you could kind of see it in one place, how these are similar and different. So the kind of the left side with the two lighter shaded boxes up here, these would be issued by SACID we talked about, and the two on the right-hand side, or if they were financings issued by a member district. So it's kind of a cheat sheet if that's a helpful place for you to go. So numbers. So before knowing some of the numbers that Kim just shared with you, a couple weeks ago, we just started with $10 million. For every $10 million of special education bonds that would be issued, we ran it over 10, 15, and 20 years. And we used current market rates as about a month ago plus 0.5%. So these are still definitely within that range based on where the market is. So for a 10-year transaction, $10 million, the payment would be about $1,250,000. be about $940,000 over 15 years, and just under $800,000 for 20 years. So I know where your brains are going. You're multiplying this by 8 or 10 or 11 or whatever it is in terms of the project scope that Kim just talked about. But we started with that just so that we could all have, okay, an understanding that this is what the debt service would look like for $10 million. What does that mean now in terms of potential cost to my individual district? So we're getting to that point. So these are examples of the allocation methods of other special ed cooperatives, how they looked at it, right? So you could always, as again, we talked about, look at just EAB. You could look at enrollment within SASED. You could look at your fall housing data for every single member district, or you could do a combination of any of these things. And this, again, this may not be the only things on the list you would look at, but these are the most common variables that other special education cooperatives have considered. Like a 3-way split or 2-way splits are very, very common. I have not had experience in any cooperative where they have just used one variable. Okay. So this, and I know these are very small, so if you have these at your place, maybe a little easier to look at, but this was looking at taking those 10, 15, and 20-year financing scenarios for $10 million that I just shared with you. Here we just looked at, I think this is the EAB. It's a 5-year average of EAB for every member district in SASED. So I'm just going to be focusing on Keeneyville here at the top because it's the first one. So for District 20, the 5-year average of their EAB is the $490 million. So the percentage of the total, $24.5 billion of all the EAB of the member district within SASED, that's 2%. So if it was a 10-year, $10 million financing, and if Keeneyville said, we want to pay our share up front, they would be paying $200,000. Or if they said, we want to be part of the financing, it'd be $25,000 for 10 years, for a total of about $250,000. And similarly, you can see 15-year amortization or a 20-year payback, what that would look like for Keeneyville. And of course, all this data is provided here for all of you in the room. Okay, the next one looks at a 5-year average of fall housing, which we had through 22-23, I believe. So again, looking at Keeneyville at the top. Now we do that as a percentage of the total, looking at that only, they represent 3.1%. Okay, so now their upfront payment in that 10-year scenario would be $310,000 if they paid upfront, or if they participated in the 10-year financing, they'd be paying almost $39,000 a year for 10 years. So you start to see, by looking at different variables, how that impacts some of these calculations. And then the last standalone method is looking at a 5-year average of SASED enrollment. Okay, so in this example, Keeneyville 20 represents 3.45% of total SASED enrollment. So in the 10-year example, they're paying almost $345,000. For financing it, it would be about $43,000 a year for 10 years.
Can I ask one question there, Tammy?
Yeah.
On the SASED enrollment number, because EADs are pretty static. They go up a little bit every year for most of us, and enrollments may change slightly, but year to year. SASED enrollments, it seems like that would almost be a reset every year based on, well, I guess that's my question. Does it reset every year based on current enrollments and it changes slightly, or is it set for a period of time, or?
The allocation method itself, whatever, that's really up to you.
Okay.
I would say most lock it in and say, we're just going to stick with this for the life of the financing, but you could amend your joint agreement more frequently to say, we're opening this up and we're going to do a calculation every year.
So yeah, this is a great picture of a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how dynamic that was over time, or if that's up to us.
It's up to you. I would say all the financings we've done as special education bonds, it's established in the beginning and it's left alone for the life of the transaction. You don't have to, but that's usually how it's.
That helps.
Sure. So I have another question. You may not be able to answer this, Tammy. Kim, hopefully you can. So in the event that the cooperative dissolves, what language is in the agreement that addresses how are the assets of the cooperative divided among all of the member districts? You see where I'm going with that? So, because really you have to, everybody should look at this as an investment in our properties, right? There's assets that the cooperative owns that should be defined in that user agreement in the event that the cooperative dissolves. Because even if it's a bitter pill for your board to swallow paying this kind of money, my argument to that could be, well, don't forget, we have whatever that proportional share, however the proportion is defined, we have that ownership. So if we walked away because the cooperative dissolved, we get something out of it. We own something. So I think you have to, before anybody jumps to conclusions about what the best calculation is, you also need to consider if the user agreement, which it should, defines if the cooperative dissolves, how its assets are distributed. I think that's just as important as how you're going to pay for this. Because there's different methodologies here, but I think that other variable is really important. And actually might even be a better way to decide how you costs. And I can't speak to user agreement, but I do know that my former cooperative, NetSec, did have that. When we ascended into them back in like 2000, that's how our costs to join the cooperative was covered.
And then
Once we bought in, we had proportional ownership rights to all of the cooperative's assets.
So it looks like it would come out the same way it went in, almost, right? So if
I
you
think it
proportionate
should.
share ended up being 5%, then it looks like that's how it would come back out, right? I don't know how, unless you had a different calculation method for pulling it out. So I thought you were gonna go, while that's possible and cooperatives have dissolved, the more likely scenario over the course of 10, 15, 20 years is a district decides to remove themselves, or two or three, from the cooperative. And that's about, that was the question I was gonna ask Tammy, and maybe Christine here is thinking too. Yeah, I'm just thinking ahead is, so when district, it doesn't happen commonly around here, but in downstate Illinois, from time to time, school districts consolidate and or reorganize. And I believe there's a provision in the law that says that the districts, they combine tax rates, you all know how that works, but they keep their existing debt, if I'm not mistaken. So the debt service that's there for District A when it combines with District B remains with the District A taxpayers until some time that debt's paid off, and the future debt would be equally distributed, just like any district. I wondered, and made me think about that, if 7 years out, some district decides, among us in this room decides to go out, that seems to be, if we all agree to dissolve, that's a different scenario than one or two dissolving, especially if we use big dogs in here, about 5 of you, let's face it. And what that would do then to that proportional debt and how you protect districts from the district that just decided to go out. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know what.
Let's pray that is defined in the current user agreement.
Current user agreement, or it would need to be, we would need to agree to modify the bylaws to accommodate that, especially when we're taking on property. And it may already be there, because it's not like this is the first time SAS has ever done this.
Well, I can tell you from experience back in, I think it was 2011, when my school district ascended into NetSec. I interviewed all of the area cooperatives, executive directors, and business people. And at that time, Mike Volpe and Sam Canada, who ran SASID, they could not explain to us how our costs to ascend would be defined. So what bothers me about that is there may not be language in your agreement that clearly spells out ascending in or withdrawing. Because what you don't want to have happen, guys, is get excited and make this commitment and then have 4 school districts pull out because they don't buy into it.
Right.
And that increases everybody's costs.
Right.
And you may not have anything protecting the cooperative for those member districts to pull out. At NetSec, if we pulled out, we lost a lot. So there was an incentive to stay in.
Right.
And again, I don't know, because I should have, but I haven't looked at your agreement. I would really urge you to look at that and maybe even talk with legal counsel about that. Because if you don't have that ascension and that pulling out language, I would highly recommend that this board look at that first before we make these other obligations.
A really good point. We're gonna make that so damn good that in the next 5 to 7 years, we're gonna have 5 other districts that want to join. But that's a legit, like, that's a legit, it goes every direction. But at the end of the day, the bonds, the investors are the ones that, they're the most, they have to be the most protected.
Yes.
Right? I mean, 100%. The bondholders always need to have to get paid.
And that's
So
why they
so
have,
that's where you have to have something in, to protect all of this, not just us, but the
Right.
investors have to be paid first.
and that's why the special education bond with the joint and several liability is so strong.
Yeah.
They're going to get paid.
Yeah. You're gonna say something, I'm sorry. They covered it.
Just to clarify, the group that would decide the special education bonds, it's not us, it's the governing board. When I'm reading here, what's been set up here.
I would think that we would make that recommendation to the governing board, and then as we would probably work out that pretty well here, and then as you're sharing this with your boards, we'll know whether or not the governing board will ultimately do that,
That
right?
was out of very.
Yeah.
Might be a cause for a joint meeting again.
Yes.
So is this the point to ask questions or?
Got a few more slides.
Okay,
if that's
I'm sorry. Just, I wanted to make sure we're,
That's okay. This is a hypothetical, we call it the three-way split of the 3 methods we looked at. And it also factors in 16% for DWC districts, because we understand you have roughly 16% of the enrollment within SASSA every year is represented by DWC districts. So here we just assigned 16% to the DWC districts. They'd be billed for their share, whether they would pay upfront or they'd be part of the financing. And then the rest was a 3-way split for everybody else. So when we did that here, now look at Keeneyville, their percentage is 2.39%. So you can start to see how coming up with some sort of split method, factoring in DWC can change the percentage to a degree. So whatever you want to look at in terms of allocation methods, we're happy to run as many analyses as you like, but we know that there will likely be some healthy discussion about that. And on the next slide, we have a report we can ultimately provide for every member district. Would you actually on the next slide? Oh, sorry, that's okay. So this is an example. So if you want to look at 5 potential allocation methods, whatever that number is, we can ultimately put on one page for you. So this is the Keeneyville 20 example. So just looking at EAB alone, fall housing, enrollment, or the 3-way split with the DWC, they can see in one place how that's different. So we're obviously happy to come up with as many scenarios and reports to help you all dissect all that. So in our experience working on these types of financings, these are the things that come up pretty routinely. Number one, how many member districts will ultimately want to pay upfront? Because I can guarantee there will be a significant number of you that probably do. And again, whether you make a fund balance contribution or if you want to do your own financing, which of course is an option. And then the allocation for the DWC districts, we just use that 16%, as I said, based on enrollment. There may be more robust discussion about that. What tends to take the most time in this process is figuring out what is the right allocation method for all of the member districts. So then you'd likely have to allow time for an amendment to the joint agreement. And then from there, ultimately just getting the decision from every member district. Are we going to be part of the financing or are we going to pay up front on our own? Those things just need to be built into your timeline. One other thing I will mention without getting into the weeds too much, but someone mentioned earlier about, well, what if we're going to do our own financing in the next few years? In whatever year SASSA would issue special education bonds, let's say, and if you're a member district that's participating in that financing, but you are also planning to borrow on your own in the same calendar year, we have to do some more review from a federal tax law perspective. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of bank qualification, where you sell up to $10 million of debt in a calendar year to be bank qualified, which means you get a slightly lower interest rate. So for purposes of federal tax law, even though if you're participating in special education bonds with a member district, your allocation doesn't count toward your debt limit. It has to be factored into your borrowing plans for bank qualification in the same calendar year. This likely will not be an issue for very many, if any of you, but it will be something we'd have to consider down the road. And then I think I have one more slide. So just in terms of next steps, is a general timeline. So this sort of lays everything out as you're kind of imagining. This type of conversation is obviously very appropriate at this point in the process. Understanding the financing mechanisms, how do we come up with an allocation method? What does that look like in terms of cost? With all of you, with business managers, ultimately the governing board, as much as that needs to happen. And then amending the joint agreement, you need to allow time for that. Ultimately, member districts decide, once you've got through the joint agreement amendment process, are we going to pay up front? Are we going to do partial financing? And then the governing board can vote on a resolution to sell special education bonds, and they're sold, and you get to closing. So everybody always asks me, well, how long does all of this take? And my answer is always, that depends. It depends really on those first two steps, how long that may take. Because once you get through those, it can be a pretty quick process, within a few months, getting the financing for SASL. But those first two steps, it varies how much time that may take depending on the cooperative. I think now that's it. So, sorry, you had another question or two?
Just want to make sure I understand. Do you mind if I come to the chalkboard and is there free chalk with today?
There's, you like some new chop dogs.
I want to understand what you, if you go to slide, I think it's 50. So I think one of the scenarios said I thought you said there was savings every year of about $6 million between like what we lease, what we currently have as leases, staff savings.
5.5.
Let's just call it 6.
Okay.
And I think we're probably going to gravitate to the 20 year. So 6 million times 20 is 122. When I look at, if we borrow 10 million, what we're paying in interest look to be like, I think that's 48. We borrowed 80, 20 years we paid 48 million in interest. That's 28. Right? And then if 6 million a year over 20 years, it would probably go up. So even though you said it's 5.8, it's going to go up every year in terms of whatever we're paying in rent. So if we subtract 120 and what we're already paying, we literally just need to come up with $8 million. And so I think the example you gave here was 10 million. So however we decide to allocate it, so people aren't taking this number and multiplying it times a different number, I think it's a little bit less than this number. And so one reason I say this is I don't want people to get scared away from this sheet and saying, oh my God, like this is only for 10 million and you're telling me 80 million. I just was wanting to show it's actually less than what you have here. And we can figure out the allocation method. I mean, we've gone through this recently at Deos. And so what we use for the entry and exit is like a 5-year average. So if you're a big school district, you're going to send 15 kids here. Well, that doesn't make sense. You should have to pay a big amount. It's more based on a 5-year amount.
Number on the, right, 5.7 million, but that's if we were all in one, under one roof, so.
No, I think you're saying that is what we pay for the place on Ogden. And that's what we pay for all the classrooms we rent. And that's what we pay, like that's currently outflowing money if we don't change anything.
And staffing. Even if we had 2 buildings, I would anticipate a pretty significant amount of savings without just not having everybody spread out.
So okay,
So I would propose we look at that 80 million and work close with our architect to say, look, target 80 million. Let's come up with some realistic options for 80 million. And then we can always go a little bit up, a little bit down, but I don't see it being anything much greater or much less than $80 million in terms of what you're going to get or what districts are willing to pony up in terms of either upfront or over the next 20 years.
So I agree. I think you all know there's the difference between the two. I just want to clarify though, Kim, something you just said. Say what's in that 5.7 again now that's outflowing.
Mark, let's just call it 6. Come on.
Let me pull it up.
I don't want to.
And does anybody else join me in being really interested in how Keith makes his eights? I just wanted to say it.
I just thought his handwriting was great.
Yeah, St. Dennis School for
I know you didn't never taught elementary school.
I never taught anything.
I'm never a college professor.
I never taught anything, so thank you for pointing out my hates. That's how I taught my ox.
So we reviewed this at the finance committee. Right, our current cost in the left column, we had a centralized option with 12 to 15 satellites. We believe we would be able to save about $150,000 in administrative costs annually. Our teachers we would not see a change in that. We need our teachers. We do think that we would see a decrease in the need of some of our central office support staff. We would look at potentially an increase in our SEL support, our sites, our social workers and so forth. I'm sorry, we'd actually be looking at a savings of about $400,000. Right now, we have so many of our itinerants traveling, and our classrooms, right, they have 2 classrooms here, 2 classrooms here, 2 classrooms here, which is all together. Don't need rightly assigned classrooms that are able to manage that differently. We believe in our vision and hearing program, we would be able to save about $116,000. Again, that would be looking at some of our itinerant services that spend a lot of time traveling. A large cost would be with our support staff, right? These are our one-to-ones, our classroom TAs, our signing assistants, interpreters, and our contractual staff. We would estimate a savings of $1.6 million. Again, one of the things, if you're asking how did you come up with that, we have to staff our programs based on where our kids are and based on the amount of kids in our classroom at the maximum. We need to have those staff there. We can't coordinate them every day, right? Like your student's absent, go to District 94, right? Like it's hard to do. If we were in a centralized location, we would be able to staff our program, and then we would have rotating staff. If a student is absent that has an aide or a classroom has fewer students, we would be much better equipped of moving staff where we needed them. And we'd have our administrators on staff, we'd have all of our itinerant services on staff. So we wouldn't need to have as many people, again, non-certified staff. We need our certified staff, our non-certified staff, which the majority of our non-certified staff, our TAs, are currently contractual staff. So right, bulking up our TAs that we hire and hopefully really bringing down that cost of our contractual folks. Same with our MADAs. These are our medical assistants. They're extremely costly. Most of them are contractual. Again, we currently have 4 certified school nurses on staff. Right, we have them in one space. We would have 1 or 2 MADAs providing services to the students. So this is where we would see a pretty significant decrease. And then just some contractual obligations. We probably spend about we believe we would save about $153,000 on mileage, studying, planning time, right? Because our teachers we don't have the capacity to be able to do that. If we had more folks together, our 5 permanent subs, we'd be able to work that out differently. And then technology, minimal savings, but probably close to about $17,000. And then our facility is the $1.3 million, almost $1.4 million. So that tallies up to $5.7 million. So that's where we saw kind of a savings with a centralized location. And if it were 2 locations, it would be very similar thought process with that.
2 comments, 1 question. The first is, Tammy, Kim, Finance Committee, thank you for putting all that together. Secondly, the 5.7 we talked about is majority operational costs, so I'm assuming that would offset the cost we have to pay for that certificate or bond, whatever we go with. So we'll see that coming back to us. And then my question is, whatever plan we come up with, I'm hoping that the first bond payment that we would all have to contribute to would be an FY27 payment. That's we're starting to build build our FY '26 budgets now, that would give us at least time to plan for any type of increased cost that we would have to provide for sure.
Can you piggyback off of that? We talked about extending the lease of the Lyle building until we can figure all this out. And you had talked about that as a 3-year likely, right? And we were gonna talk about maybe an early out clause, if that was possible.
We're still negotiating that. I don't have it
Okay.
ready to be brought forward, but Rachel and I have been talking with Tom. Our escape clause might be a little bit longer than I'd like it to be, so that's what we're trying to work on. But he's open to that, with a very, which I thought was an okay, like a 2% increase in our rent, which I thought was fair.
And the reason I asked that question is that's gonna determine how quick
Yes.
we can move, some.
Yeah, VP, in talking with him, he's up to 3 or 4 years at this point. So, yeah, I mean, this is a process.
Oh, sure.
And, right, we're committed to it. We want to make sure that it's done well. We want to make sure that it's done right. We want to make sure that we're ready for this. I kind of look at these next few years as really building our capacity to work differently and more robustly with our current students, so that when we do have a site or 2 sites, we're ready. We're ready to hit the ground running and go. It's very exciting. I think it's also very scary, but it's very exciting. And I think our opportunities with having staff together are incredibly limitless. And I think if we know where we're going, even though it might take, right, even me, I would have liked to have done this 2 months ago, but I'm good with that, right? Like we're committed to this project. We're committed to making this work. We're committed to making sure everybody walks away feeling good about this and getting more out of it than we're currently getting. Because we know that is incredibly relevant, and we know we have students that we're not servicing that we can and we should. And I think that also, I would anticipate some savings with that as well. That's what the finance guys are on the subcommittee. You know, they still can't get over, like, are you paying for this? And we're moving on. But, I mean, really, 200 kids outplaced, if we even have some of those back, that would be a savings, particularly now that we're eligible for SLOTs. We're pulling from the same sources. So, better build us up so we get more kids, so we're not losing out to other co-ops.
Tammy, I have a couple of questions. First, I'll thank you again for the presentation. Hearing it twice, super helpful. Is a 30-year issuance an option? I know the legislature just gave school districts, I'm not advocating for that, but is that another option that if we wanted to look at down the road as we fine tune this more?
To my knowledge, the special education bonds were not under the same statute.
And then in terms of, and I understand some districts can pay up front, some districts may finance their own, but if there's a collective group of us who go out and issue special education bonds, I think one of the questions our board would want to know is, how does that get paid for? I know it doesn't impact our overall debt capacity. Is that something like, normal bonds like we issue and it's not part of the operating funds, or does that come out of the operating funds when we have to pay that debt back?
So just to clarify, you mean if you're a member district that participates in SACID's bonds?
Correct.
And you're making a payment to SACID, you would pay it from, you have the option, right, to fit it within your operating budget, or if you wanted to sell your own bonds independently, you could sell non-referendum bonds against your debt service extension days, for example, and finance that way. But if you want to be part of the financing of the cooperative, you're somehow working it into your annual operating budget. You don't have the ability to levy a separate tax levy to pay your share of SACID's bond.
All right, that helps. What about if some of us chose to exercise their DSEP on our own? Would we be able to do that to pay that off?
Yes, either upfront or over time. You could be in a situation where you say, we're going to issue DSEP bonds annually to cover our debt service. You certainly could do that, probably as a working cash bond, for example. Sure.
Just to put a finer point on that, the simple way to put it is you can't levy, if you're not the district issuing the debt, if the SACID's issuing the debt, there's no levy. You would have to do some type of borrowing that would allow you to levy both the operating funds or alternate revenue sources.
Right, there's no
Okay,
opportunity for a separate operating levy
Right.
to meet your obligation to SACID.
SACID can't obligate us to levy.
Right.
Yeah.
it's a small variable, but I was looking at Keith's chicken scratch roll. And I'm sure that I was
Very nicely printed.
One variable that we did not include is whatever new facility you're gonna build, there's a cost to operate it. So when we're paying rent, when we're paying, whether it's to the administrative offices or it's for classrooms, part of that cost is operational costs. Not anywhere in that, quite that, 128 minus 120, is 8 remaining that you have to figure out. It's going to be a little bit more than that. It's not going to be significant, but there are going to be operational costs with the facility that you'd have to buy.
Insurance, utilities.
But on the offset, that 6 million I use, that's gonna go up every year over the next 20 years. And so I think there's some netting effect in the scratch up there.
I'm a little hesitant about 40% of that 6 million, because that's coming from eliminating contract staff on the paraprofessionals, both with the MATA side and with the one-to-one pieces, and I just wonder how solid those two numbers are. 1.3 billion was from the eliminating of all the one-to-one aides that were eliminated were the contract ones, and all the MATA aides that were eliminated were the contract ones. And if that was an easily solvable problem, Julie would have solved it in a long time.
Oh, I see what you're saying. We would still need aides and teacher assistants, there's no doubt about that. But I think, right, like if we are in one space, we're gonna have more people there that wouldn't require us to need as many in general, right? Like right now, our teachers here, for example, if they're isolated, you're here, Matt, but right on.
No, I'm not disagreeing that
Yeah.
there isn't
Yeah.
personnel savings to be had. I'm just saying that when you eliminate only the contract side and you leave the things, there's a significantly higher cost to the contract people. And I just wonder how strong that number really is. Because I don't, once again, if you could have staffed them with general positions, we would have staffed them with general positions before. And so we eliminated all the premium people.
I'm gonna play board chair here and make sure we keep moving out of respect to everybody's time, and those are really big decisions. This is an awesome discussion, and Tammy, this I'm sure helps everybody else as much as it does me. I would encourage us, Kim and probably Rachel on this, and Julie too, but we're looking at this. I would encourage us to take the bigger discussion we're having and Keith's, good overview there and kind of divide it into A and B. A would be true facility costs. So we can just focus on that, because I feel like when you're looking at facility costs, we all know, I ran a district, I went from 3 buildings to 2. Yep, there were some personnel savings. I think that's a little conceptual. I feel like we need to focus on building costs and the difference. That seems like an attainable number to project out a couple years out with these scenarios, with insurance costs and utilities and all these other things that factor into, like John said, operational costs. I would rather really overestimate what it's going to cost us and be pleasantly surprised to the downside than feel like we're selling it to ourselves and then coming up a little bit short. There's a big difference. Then I think the B column is the personnel side, because but it's just a different cost. Net at the end, it's going to matter. Hey, how much more is this going to cost us? There's going to be a cost, but it may not be as bad as we think. That's good, but I'd rather be really conservative with those kind of projections, because I think it gets pretty hard, and we still have 3 options on the table. You know what I mean? I just think we need to feel like maybe that's facilities committee, or finance, we need to dial into that a little bit more. But just to keep us moving, is there any more questions for Tammy or on the finance side of this? Because we got to do some more work.
Do you want to talk about a moratorium on all capital improvements on our current building until we figure out what we're going to do?
Not right now, but it's kind of an unspoken. We have a roof project at Southeast, $1.7 million. It has been, it was budgeted for and talked about a couple of years, so we're a couple of years out of doing it. Rachel and I did talk with VP, and Rachel popped in if needed, but VP said, Kim, the light, like, it's at the end of the road. Like, this has to be done. Particularly, we're not looking at 1 year or 2 years or 3 years out, right? It could look 3 or 4 years out. We also said anything we do with HVAC, we would be able to repurpose that in any type of building we have in that, so it would not be like necessarily a total loss of those pieces. And I think as we move forward with our facilities, right, we are limiting anything that we do. So as far as a moratorium, I don't know if we're able to do that, if we need.
I just didn't want to make sure we put a new roof on and then 4 years from now we tear it up. We put this new HVAC in and that part of the building doesn't even exist anymore. So I just wondered if there's anything that we'd already approved that we're going to do this summer, or we plan to do the next couple of summers that we might want to hold off on.
So we did approve the HVAC and the roof at Southeast. Talking to VP, he did not think that would be wise for us not to do it. So
Because there's no heat and water's rolling into the roof, or?
we've had issues with the heat not working.
Okay.
Where we've had to send kids home a couple days or put heaters in there. Rachel, what else did he say? Did I hit it?
The plenum work also had to be done, which was the life, health, safety, and then what else? Yeah, he just said, given that they're at the end of their life cycle, it would be wise to, and we might be there 3 or 4 more years until this project is complete. He's recommending that we still move forward with it.
The only thing you need to be aware of, side of it, is if we do the HVAC work and we put brand new units up there, and then we do construction on that facility and repurpose, as you call it, those units, it will immediately void the warranty. And there could be complications with moving them from one location to another. I'm actually kind of disappointed because VP and Mike just had this conversation like a month ago regarding, a month and a half ago, regarding our current capital project for the summer. And we decided to not do that because it would void the warranty and there could be complications.
Well,
I
caution.
Yeah.
That works.
Maybe there's a follow-up discussion with BP, just to dial in a little bit more.
Yep.
And then I would say too, with some additions, if Southeast was added on to, sometimes it's just its own, the new addition is its own HVAC system, separate from the original too. But obviously talking about 2 stories or God knows whatever else. It's a tough one because we're in this purgatory between knowing what the hell we're doing. That's kind of a weird pun there. I didn't mean to do that. Not knowing what we're doing and to the point, not wanting to waste money on something. So whatever we can do to look at as essential work that has to be done.
We'll
And then separating it out, things that we can really have to see, so.
And when we, sorry about that.
No, go ahead. No.
Are there repairs that we can do in the interim to get us through until we make the bigger decision? And please, no, I'm not accusing you of any wrongdoing or anything like that, but if we do the roof this summer, there's a percentage to be earned. And then if we go back and do more work, there's another percentage to be earned. I just think we have to do that with skepticism. Again, I'm not accusing them of any wrongdoing, but I also don't want to pay fees over and over again in a 5-year period for work.
We don't want to drop $1.5 million and then tear it all out 2 or 3 years, right? That's the bottom line.
And it depends how dire the current situation is. I have no idea. If it's bad, then you may not have a choice but to do the work. If it can either be temporarily repaired or addressed so that it lasts a couple more years until 3 years or whatever, so we can do this work.
BP will be coming to all of our forthcoming facility meetings, and Tammy will be joining all of our finance meetings. So these are definitely some other areas that we could flesh out. In addition to Rachel and I having those conversations with them. Saxon doesn't have anyone currently on staff. I could go out to Southeast and assess this ourselves, other than Rachel and I, if you want us to do that. So we are relying on BP to help us with these decisions.
Yeah, facilities committee next week, right? Let's, VP's coming, let's dial in with this with them, so we can keep that letting know how important this is to us to consider and really separate out the essential work from what maybe can wait now that we're here. And then so next steps here, I think it's all the more reason we want to keep the urgency on here to keep this moving along. We've made incredible progress. Kim and the staff, I commend you for the work you've been done here. This is really starting, some things are starting to become more clear, but we got some big decisions to make. So we got facilities coming up this next week, and then remind me, finance after, or what's the
Probably
date?
in April.
That's being established for.
Yeah.
And I just throw out, I know finance and facilities are working on a lot of this, but I don't know if we're to go around 2018, if there's uniform support for this. And I worry about you guys getting too far ahead of your skis. That $80 million is going to be a hard conversation in my board, no matter what the piece is. I don't, we've heard a lot of the same voices, and I just want to put my hesitancy out here right now, because I don't know that I can get that through.
We're now on air to, but what would you be getting through right now? Because we don't know what it is until we dive into it. Though.
And I just wanted, that's my point of saying that as you go through this process, please realize that we may not have full buy-in to this journey yet, and that
Right.
should be part of that kind of conceptualization.
I agree. The only way we're going to get there and get 18 districts on board, I'll tell you right now, I'm never going to say the word 80 million to my school board. I can tell you that. I could rebuild both my schools for 80 million. So, to the point, probably not, and nor will we ever pay 80 million. Neither will you. We'll pay a tiny fraction of whatever that number is, minus after we do all this. But I think first we got to have the finance committee, and then Kim, I'm just going to say there might be. I realize at some point it's almost we have a working meeting just for this purpose we have to consider, or a joint meeting of the finance and facilities at some point. I think we gotta keep it moving. And we get to that point where we're ready to make some decisions so we can, and the big thing is going to be, to Tammy's presentation, is whatever it's going to be, it's going to cost money. There's going to be a net increased cost initially to the districts. And then how best to allocate that among the districts is going to be a really important one, to your point. So, all right, so facilities is next week and finance is coming up. And then we'll keep the foot on the gas here, right?
I just said, not trying to beat a dead horse, but $70 million doesn't cost us anything more than we're currently paying if the numbers hold true. So
I hear you.
That's the floor.
Yeah.
So
I feel way better about our total conversation because when that 5.7 million in there, I was doing the same math you were doing. I just think we need to be conservative again, so that we're not surprised to the upside. That's what none of us want to tell our school board one number and come back later and say, "Oops, sorry, it cost a whole lot more."
Yeah, Rachel, Lizzie, and I will work on that.
Yeah, I know you will. Yeah.
We do that. We didn't throw it together, right? We worked on it, but we could go in there and dig a little bit deeper and.
I mean, it's conceivable that several years out, we're in a much better position in a multitude of ways here, but I feel like we're not quite there yet. So is there anything else in terms of presentation? Tammy, anything else from you? Any more questions for her? Kim? Before you cover the bases we want to get covered here? I know we had a lot heavy lift here.
Mark, I would
Yes.
strongly suggest that what you threw out be the direction in terms of finding finance and facilities
Yeah.
at this point, or we're gonna be round and round.
I agree.
Conversation. I think, at this point, we're there now. I think
Yep.
the facilities group did their job to
Yep.
look at all the options. Now we've got to start putting together.
I agree. Not that I matter, but I'm sitting between the two. I mean, I'm going to both. I'm on facilities, but I think we need to have that facilities committee meeting and probably the finance, but if we need to, we'll bring facilities to the next finance. I mean, whatever it takes. By the time we do that, we're probably a damn near a majority of our board here, I would imagine, but that's fine. And we've done this before. We'll invite everybody. We'll do whatever we got to do to keep it moving, but we got to keep it moving.
What I'll do then, because we don't have a facilities meeting scheduled for April, we already scheduled for March, that was hard to do. What I'll do is for April and May, keep them separate and bring some joint committees in there as well. And then we could, once we get dates on the calendars, we could float like which ones we might not be able to cancel, which ones we might be able to post, and then we could invite, the group if they wanted to, send out invites to other people as well.
Okay.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mark.
No,
and I love what he did up here on the board and his scenario. could be accurate, but that only holds true if that $6 million comes back to the member districts. So as part of the finance committee, it would be nice to see what the plan is with those dollars based on all the conversation, based on what you shared with us, Kim, for that to happen, which will help us in our decision making when it comes to the overall cost. That makes sense.
And we'll get into more details as a finance committee, but I don't envision the money coming back to the districts and coming then back to SACID and bond payments. I'm seeing SACID being responsible for a certain portion of the debt, and you've got to make it work.
Absolutely.
And then the membership districts are only picking up that differential, which the 8s are true. It's the 8 at the bottom that we are responsible for, and then we'll figure out how we allocate it.
That's a lot easier stuff.
That's how I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning we're on the hook for $8 million. Let's figure out how we're going to divvy it up. Let's agree that it's going to be 20 years. You can see the schedule in here based on the 10 million, and that's what we bring to our board, and that's what we're on the hook for.
80 million was never going to be 80 million. I agree completely. I agree. But we gotta get to what that number, what that
Thanks
number
for
is.
that
and
follow-up question. Maybe that helps people process. We're talking about borrowing $8 million. We're on the hook for $8 million as districts. SAS would be on the hook for the $71 million. Yeah. It winds up being an $80 million project.
Okay. All right. We're gonna roll on with the agenda. Christina, 6D, nope, that's it. 6E, right? And thank you very
Plan
much.
update, yeah.
Yep, let's do a quick overview.
Yep, you got it. High quality staffing, Julie's been going to several job fairs. We've been sending some of our PAs along with them to recruit, so we are working quickly and feverishly on that. Our programs, Lindy has pulled together a literacy committee, taking a look at just literacy and instruction in our classrooms. And also, we're trying very shortly to have a pretty comprehensive development plan that we will be sharing here. Communications, focusing on, our committees continue to meet, huge focus on culture building. We have a lot of activities going on at SACID. They're all listed here for you. And then operations, you know where we are with operations. And Rachel is working hard on getting the budget finalized. The other piece I have for my executive report, I already went through the ESY structure, so I won't repeat that. We did bring back most valuable employee this semester, so I want to formally congratulate several of our staff members who were chosen by their peers for their dedication to teamwork and collaboration. Those folks are Leslie Bentley. She is the assistant to our SIS team. We have Caitlin Dalton, who's one of our new BCBAs, who is just outstanding. Natalie Genoa, I'm not saying her name right. Sorry, Natalie. She is one of our teachers at Southeast. She is awesome. Jackie Jackson is one of our vision teachers over at Addison Trail. And then Cleo Kennelly and Kim Zaragoza are our teacher assistants. One is with the DHH program and one is over at Laurel South. So we'll have more recognition fourth quarter. So we're glad to have that. And on a final note, one of the approvals that were in the consent agenda was Julie's resignation. And I just want to publicly thank Julie for her dedication, her time, her energy, her just exceptional work here at SACID. So
Thank you.
That's all I got for open session.
All right, we need a motion to go to closed session at 3:39 p.m. Second? Come on, second. Roll call.
District 25?
Yes.
District 33? Left. District 34?
Yes.
District 45?
Yes.
District 48? District 58?
Yes.
District 60?
Yes.
District 63?
Yes.
District 66?
Yes.
68?
Yes.
88?
Yeah.
94?
Yes.
180?
Yes.
201?
Yes.
202?
Yes.
205? Yes. And District 20?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are going into closed session. Okay, everybody, we are back in at open session at 4:16. We got some action items resulting from closed session. Take a motion for 9A, approval of the instructional closed session recordings for the dates.
So moved, Winfield 34.
Second, 58.
7:58. Can this be voice?
Yeah, this can be.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 9B, approval of the semi-annual review of recommendations to maintain the confidentiality of all closed session.
So moved, Winfield 34.
Second, 58.
Matt, Kevin, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Somebody else get your motion in. Now's your chance. Approval of certified staff sub-rate increase.
So moved, Winfield 34.
Second,
68.
Pat, from 114.31 to 145, effective August 1st. Roll call, please.
District 88?
Yeah.
District 94?
Yes.
District 180?
Charlie Locke.
Okay. District 201?
Yes.
District 202?
Yes.
District 205, she's gone, right? District 20?
Yes.
District 25?
Yes.
District 33, no, 34.
Yes.
District 45?
Yes.
District 48? District 58?
Yes.
District 60? Okay. District 63?
Yes.
And District 68?
Yes.
Motion passed.
And 66, yes.
I'm sorry, Did I forget you in there? I apologize.
9D, we have a motion for approval of 4% salary increase for non-CBA and administrative staff.
So moved, 45.
Second, Winfield 34.
I'm gonna pull a motion. Brian, roll call, please.
District 48?
Yeah.
District 58?
Yes.
District 63?
Yes.
District 66?
Yes.
District 68?
Yes.
District 88?
Yeah.
District 94?
Yes.
District 201?
Yes.
District 202?
Yes.
District 20?
Yes.
District 25?
Yes.
District 34?
Yes.
And District 45?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, and then last but not least, 9E, approval of new administrative job descriptions. Anybody but Dr. Rich?
201.
201?
Second, District 20. Jack and Omar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
Winfield 34.
Is there a second?
Second, 45.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned at 4:20, everybody.